Talk about the war. It was 4 bloody, horrible years, 4 bloodiest years in American history, beyond any doubt. 618,000 Americans will be killed, as compared to 112,000 Americans in World War One and 405,000 Americans in World War Two. 2% of the population is killed by the war, as opposed to 0.1% in World War One and 0.25% in World War Two. Why was it so deadly? Well, one problem is technology. The Colt revolver, the Winchester repeating rifle, the improved steel cannon will all make weapons far more deadly. Marching formations will begin the war with these, where everybody lines up on marches, but they'll disappear by the end of the war. They're basically fighting an 18th century war with 19th century weapons, and these weapons are more deadly and accurate, and so marching in a big line has become really stupid, but nobody figures that out until about halfway through the war. We'll end the war with things like trenches, fortifications, extended sieges. Other technology will appear. I mentioned the submarine and the torpedo, and the ironclad, but the hot air balloon will be used. Now this doesn't. Basically, you send it up over the battlefield, and there's a person in there with a telegraph thing who's able to, or maybe even flags to signal, who's able to give information about what the battle looks like from high. The telegraph is going to be important as well. And the telegraph corps is actually ultimately run by Andrew Carnegie, who's going to become the richest man in the world later. We'll talk more about him. The railroad will allow for the concentration of troops, which will lead to enormous battles. The ability to get troops to a place very quickly means you can get more troops in one place, and you can have battles where literally a couple of 100,000 people take place in the battle. All these things are going to make this war terribly disastrous. I have to tell the story of Wilbur McLean. Wilbur McLean owned a farm where his family lived right outside of Washington, D.C., in a place called Manassas, Virginia. And the first battle of the war, the Battle of Bull Run, will be fought on his farm. 60,000 troops, about 30,000 from each side, will get together about 30 miles outside of D.C. And fight a battle in this guy's backyard. McLean, disgusted with the war, will move quite a ways away to deep into Virginia to a place called Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. He says he wants to get away from the war. He's had enough of it. 4 years later, he's walking down the street in Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, and a soldier walks up and says, General Grant needs your living room. And the treaty that ended the Civil War between Lee and Grant will be signed in this man's parlor. And Wilbur McLean can honestly say for the rest of his life, the Civil War began in my backyard and ended in my parlor. It's an amazing American story, but it's true. But let's go back to Bull Run. Bull Run, everybody assumed this would be one battle, the North would win, and that would be the end of all this nonsense. And in fact, politicians and wealthy people from D.C. went out to the battle site to picnic and watch the war. They sat up on a ridge above the battle, looking down, thinking it would be spectacular and glorious to watch these boys fight. Of course, it was terrible. And it was deadly and bloody and all these things. It started as a Union rout, the North being commanded by McDowell, the South being commanded by Beauregard. And as the Southerners are running away, reinforcements arrive, commanded by Stonewall Jackson, or Thomas Jackson he was called at the time. And he orders his men to stand and not run away. And as the other Southern troops are running away, they say, look at Jackson's boys standing up there like an old stone wall. And they begin to fall in beside him. And the undisciplined Northern troops who are chasing the Southerners will be massacred as they run into this line that Jackson has set up. Jackson will gain the name Stonewall Jackson, which he'll take on for the rest of his life. Although he's embarrassed by it. He says, that's not my name, that's my boy's name. I didn't do that. And the North will end up fleeing from the field, and all the picnickers who had come out to watch the battle will be running, trying to stay ahead of them. Bull Run changed everything. What everybody thought would be a short, quick, easy war is clearly going to be something entirely different after the Southern victory at the first Battle of Bull Run. By the end of 61, this is really the only action, except that West Virginia has seceded from Virginia because West Virginia is in the mountains and they don't really have slaves, and become its own state and join the North.